Our next guest, Jack Kalavritinos, is a veteran of 2 U.S. presidential administrations, with substantial time spent at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the U.S. Department of Labor, and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. He's the principal and founder of JK Consulting, and he's also a member of the APCO Worldwide International Advisory Council, an advisory council to one of the largest government affairs consulting firms that works with pharmaceutical and other industries, both here in the U.S. and across the globe. Jack will bring a special message to you from the perspective of somebody who's served in many different realms about the growing importance of patient insights and the history that patients bring when they enter into the policy arena in the kidney space, and the principles that we honor by being active in raising our voice. Jack's perspective is interesting to us because he connects the dots that FOCO has raised, Hilde has raised as a government official, and that Dr. Sheldon has raised from his perspective, not just at the FDA, but also as an innovator. Jack, go right ahead.
Paul, I really appreciate being here. I appreciate the AAKP and GW inviting me to be part of this really important panel and this unbelievable global summit that's occurring during the decade of the kidney, which I just think is so wonderful to have that name. You know, kudos for this kind of collaboration. And a quick note, known you, Paul, a long time through our work together in government and in the private sector. And, you know, I have a personal connection to GW. Both my father-in-law, who's a native Washingtonian, and my brother-in-law both went to GW Medical School, and very proud graduates, both eye surgeons, and I've heard a lot of wonderful things. And being a native Washingtonian myself, I know what a fine institution that GW is. But we're here to talk about kidney health and talk about patient engagement. And you know, that's something that I can speak to because I had the wonderful opportunity to serve at HHS twice in my career in 2 different administrations. The previous administration had a chance to work on the transition and immediately go to the FDA before coming back to HHS. And that was a unique experience because I actually arrived there together with my colleague, Anna Abram. The 2 of us were the first 2 appointees. We were actually there before Scott Gottlieb arrived. And I eventually became the Associate Commissioner of the Office of External Affairs. The thing about that office is a lot of people who know it because of its media relations role and because of the fact that it actually runs the website and the social media accounts. And God knows there are a lot of Twitter accounts at the FDA. What people don't really realize is the history of the patient engagement aspect of that office. What I mean by that is that the patient programs and the patient engagement programs have been run out of the Office of External Affairs for many years. In fact, the very first patient engagement person and entity, and his name is Richard. He retired on my watch in 2017 after a long and illustrious career, but he was the first person at the FDA who would engage with the HIV and AIDS activists in the 1980s. And through that open door and engagement that was forged, an office was created. And it's hard to believe now, but there was no office of patient engagement, making sure that the patient voice was heard throughout the department in the various centers. It was focused on that one important issue. But from that point on, moving into the 90s and moving into the 2000s, actual programs were developed in order to really listen to and make sure that patient voices were heard. It still was actually pretty minimal, I would say, until it became more bolstered through the Office of Constituent Affairs and the Office of Patient Programs was created. And I'm very proud to say that in the last administration, the patient liaison program really took off. And once the patient program at FDA came to its full fruition, there was really full participation in the development of drugs, biologics, and medical devices at all levels. And I'm sure things are going to continue in the next couple of years to follow on the same path that it had taken when I was there. When, regardless of where the office was physically located, the fact is that was that the office of the commissioner was very, very mindful of the importance, and not just the office of the commissioner, but the center directors, each of whom actually created their own patient offices. But it's one thing to have an office, it's another to really understand that the voice of patients who are suffering from various disease states, and actually also having the data that is developed. Oftentimes, it's outside groups such as AAKP who provide very important data to NIH and to the FDA. Back to AAKP, I am just so impressed in talking to you, Paul, and just doing my own research that the partnerships you've created with your colleagues in Europe and the EU, the 9 partnerships that were recently unveiled, and I understand there's some more partnerships with international patient groups in this kidney space from around the world that will be announced. That is so important for all the right reasons, and especially for data, because without that data and the insights that are gained from it, it's more challenging for the private sector to be able to, use these close collaborations. But with the data and having that every step of the way, innovations will really be off the charts. And I'm just so impressed with the consortium that's been created, by the fact that this global conference is created. When I think about where patient engagement was, where it has been, and now currently where it's going, it's just an exciting time. So uh, I'll stop there and we can have some Q&A, but I just want to say congratulations for this kind of engagement that you all are involved with globally.
Thank you very much, Jack, for your comments. And let me throw a question to you. Can you tell me, from your background and the many different experiences you've had on many sides of the negotiating table, what are the unique values that patients and patient insights bring to industry, in particular at a time like this, in the drive for solutions for kidney patients? What impact are they having for companies as companies are driving innovations into the consumer marketplace? Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Boy, there's a lot there, and I really appreciate that. Some of these topics you and I have had a chance to talk about. So let's start with industry. I think it's so important that companies that want to be competitive, whether it's in the pharmaceutical, the biological, the medical device space, really use patient insight data in order to help drive their decision making from the beginning through the clinical trials all the way through until the end. When it comes to government authorities, whether it's NIH, whether it's FDA, frankly, whether it's the folks at HHS back at the headquarters, before decisions are made to do what we tried so hard to do with Secretary Azar, is bring patients in, bring patient groups in, just like we did with your fine organization on the issue of drug pricing. We spent a lot of time talking about kidney health and chronic kidney disease. And that's why eventually the executive order was put in place, and Secretary Azar's efforts, and Deputy Secretary Hargan, Kidney X. But even on topics that had nothing to do with the specific issue of kidney disease, we brought in patients in order to help to guide us. So the best example I can think of was drug pricing. And you came in, and your president, Richard Knight, and really helped to better instruct us as to what were some of the biggest challenges facing patients as they were hit with pretty big bills at the pharmacy counter. Well, it's no surprise that when the president's blueprint for reducing drug prices, the most significant effort that's really ever been undertaken by any president of either party. When it came time to unveiling that, when we had an event at the Rose Garden and then back at the HHS headquarters, who were the groups that were in the front row? I can tell you, in the front row were patient organizations. And I'm so happy that AAKP could be part of that when the past president and Secretary Azar stood there and talked about here are the initiatives that would be undertaken in order to help patients reduce their out-of-pocket expenses. On the industry side, also want to talk about, my time at Covidian, which was then merged with Medtronic. I remember back in 2000, when was it, 10, 12, it was a big deal to talk about making the case for value and also bringing in the voice of physicians in order to better instruct our innovators in how to best serve providers who actually used our medical devices. Well, now, not only is that continuing to be so important, but it's so important to value and to listen to those patient insights and the data that is provided by a whole range of patient groups. Any company that wants to continue to succeed is going to weave in provider and patient voices as they're looking to develop and improve. Also, I wanted to mention that when I served at FDA and we heard loud and clear from various groups around different diseases, whether they were some that affected the biggest percentage of our population, or frankly, whether it was some of the really terrible rare diseases that impact particular groups around the country. It's so important for patients when they're coming in and talking to senior leaders or mid-level leaders at FDA to speak constructively, to be able to bring facts to the table and the stories of how lack of reimbursement and lack of approval on some of the new technologies are impacting their family lives, bring data to the table, and do so outside of the typical arenas where you have patient representatives coming in that are part of the existing program. It's perfectly great to be seeking your own meetings, and I have found that regardless of administration, senior leaders want to hear from groups. Lastly, I'll say that the article that you shared with me on fighting the unbearable lightness of neglecting kidney health and the decade of the kidney was so important to educate me, and really brought to light just how not enough members of the public and actually policymakers truly understand how many Americans and how many people around the world are impacted. Dialysis and kidney transplants, I think the authors called that the tip of the iceberg. And frankly, that's what most lay people, that's what most members of the public really think about. So I think the real challenge for patient groups, as I end here, and I hope I haven't gone on too long, is really to better help to tell policymakers just what is that overall impact that goes beyond what it is that most of us know, and to be able to translate that into terms that policymakers will understand. And then, like we've said before, be part of the process to bring their voices and patient data every step of the way in order to help to improve patients' lives. So I really appreciate the question, Paul.
Thank you very much, Jack, for your presentation and for answering my question.